All right, everybody. Thanks for calling in for this week's Weedley Report. As you know, sometimes I like to start the report with a relevant song to, get us in the mood or whatever. And Puff the Magic Dragon and Jackie Paper kind of give it away. I remember I used to listen to this song when I was a kid. Of course, I didn't know it back then. But now in hindsight, I guess it's pretty obvious. Actually, remember that show F8? What is it? H&R Puff and Stuff? Wow, that was a pretty crazy show too. Maybe that'll show up in one of the next Wheatley reports. But anyway, let's get into it because we got some interesting things to talk about this week, and there was some significant news, like really big news that could not, change the industry, but definitely be an impetus for the growth of it. And that's the deal. There was a big deal in the market of 5 billion Canadian, which I think is about 3.5 billion US deal. And we'll talk about the details. But the important thing is that Goldman Sachs was an advisor and Bank of America was the financer. So now you have like legitimate Wall Street companies getting into this industry. So, it's a done deal that it's going to become legal federally. I don't see how it's not going to be. So, just for a little introduction, these are kind of the themes and opportunities that we talk about. Complete widespread social acceptance. It seems like these days. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's anyone who I know or am aware of that's against, this becoming legal. Not necessarily in a recreational sense, but in a medicinal sense. So I think it's inevitable that it's going to become legal federally, and there is actually some news this week that points in that direction. I mean, obviously, people talk about the recreational cannabis segments because people just have these images of, people getting stoned and this and that, and they kind of equate it to like a bar and people drinking. But, I don't think the opportunities are going to be in cannabis per se, in the sense of companies that have valuation based on cannabis, like farms and so forth, because the market's completely glutted and prices are going down. But the medicinal marijuana industry should really be seen as a biotech industry. Now, it's just kind of like, alcohol, I guess, has some medicinal, uses, like, I guess, cleaning out a cut or infection or rubbing alcohol or whatever. But in this market, it's just a lot more. There's been all kinds of research that shows that medicinal marijuana can, I saw a story this week that it's could be used to prevent cancer. Actually, it could slow down cancer. So, it's almost like the wonder drug, and it's a shame that it was illegal for so long. The reason why it was illegal is because the first head of the DEA, Anslinger, was very anti-Mexican, and a lot of Mexicans were coming into the country now. Back then, sound familiar? And he was very racist, so he tried to, do this propaganda campaign that the Mexicans were bringing in all the medicinal marijuana, all this legal marijuana that made people crazy. Like the movie, whatever that movie. Whatever, I forget what it is, but anyway. And then there was also the Hearst family, allegedly was against it and funding a lot of people against it because they knew they had control of a lot of the timber industry because they were newspaper people, so they needed the paper. And they knew that hemp would be a much more effective way to make paper, and that's one of the reasons why they got behind it too. And we'll see some proof later that for a lot of before that, marijuana was basically very, accepted or not shunned. I mean, you could go into the drugstore and get it in 1920, for instance. Okay, and then there's obviously the ancillary opportunities, which are the side businesses, and the Levi Strauss model, which I talk about, which is, like in the gold rush, it went on for I think 5 years, and pretty much only the people that got there in the first 3 months made any money, because by the time everyone else got there, all the gold claims were staked out and it was gone and so forth. But Levi Strauss said, I can just sell something to these people, whether they're good or not. They still need to buy jeans. So ancillary opportunities are something that we like to focus on. So now, speaking of an opportunity, I mean, look at this thing. It's the smell-proof pouch from these guys at Bazem. Right now, I'm not endorsing this product or anything. I'm just saying, if you want to just start thinking and brainstorming, start thinking about things like this. All right, as far as I can tell, these guys are just a small private company, but maybe a company, maybe there's going to be a big demand for these bags in the future. But I guess if it becomes legal, then you wouldn't need to worry about the bloodhounds. So who knows? Maybe this is not a good product. I just picked it because I thought it looked pretty funny. But yeah, that's a good point. If pot is becoming legal, then you don't really need to worry about bloodhounds. I think the bloodhounds could find it anyway. I don't believe it. I mean, those things could smell drop of blood from like miles. I mean, they're like sharks. So anyway, this week's playa, and every week we have a playa, is Snoop Dogg. And I never knew this. This is his real name, Calvis, I guess, Broadass. But anyway, he is a really smart guy, even if you don't like his music. I mean, I don't really like it. I don't dislike it, but it's not the first thing I'd put on. But he's focusing on these ancillary things. And this week was a milestone because he has a venture firm and they closed their debut fund. They got to their $45 million target and they closed the fund. So that's why Snoop Dogg is the play of the week. Oh, all right. I guess I'm kind of not using this thing right here. But anyway, so this is the news, some important news this week. Strength in equities. And it all came from this deal, this Constellation Brands Canopy Growth news. And here's why this is a transformational deal, because Goldman Sachs was in on it. Merrill Lynch was in on it. So basically this means the big boys from Wall Street are showing up. And, it's another reason why I think this is going to become completely federal legally, because if Goldman Sachs sees a way to make money, they're going to lobby. And as we know, Goldman Sachs basically has every, administration taken over. And they're obviously smart people. And if they can get marijuana to be legal in the United States federally, and they can make a lot of money off of it, well, I would assume that they're going to make an effort for it. This story kind of caught my eye because it just shows the increase in cannabis use in Canada. Last year it was 175,000 patients, and now it's 300,000. I mean, I suppose a lot of that just has to do with, it's easier to get licenses and so forth. But, it could be showing that as it becomes more socially acceptable, the demand is going to grow. Now, this is one of the things I talked about before, about how there are steps going on that are going to make the odds of it being legal federally increase. So the DEA are just taking steps that more marijuana can be grown in the country for research, and they're going to put out more license. And as far as I know, the only place where it's legal to grow it federally is at the University of Mississippi, and they've been doing it, I think, since the 50s. But now the DEA is going to give out more licenses and permits or whatever. So that's a sign, again, that it's becoming just more accepted and so forth. This story was pretty funny. A class action suit in California. I mean, this is really crooked. This has to do with like politicians trying to get money. They're calling it a case of taxation without representation because in the suit, alleges that county officials made the growers give them big registration taxes and fees and so forth. And my guess is that a lot of cash changed hands in smoky back rooms. But then in 2017, they banned all the cultivation. I'm sorry, as of January 2018. So it sounds like the politicians thought they were going to just like, snooker these guys. And now the cannabis growers have probably hired some kind of, douchebag attorney that's going to go after them, and whatever. I just thought it was an interesting story, and who knows, probably it'll be a movie one day. All right, so now I'll just look at some of the stocks, and like I said, everything's been strong because of that deal I mentioned. So Apria, a little bit overbought here, and it's testing resistance at this level. And there's resistance at 1130 because it was support from May, June, and July. But it's overbought, so we'll have to see how this plays out. If it settles above 1130, that'll probably be support, and if it settles below 1130, that'll probably be resistance going forward, at least like for the next few weeks. Again, here's Aurora Cannabis, and a lot of these things all kind of trade, not the same, but because of the ETF, the ETF that we're going to look at owns them all, so they all kind of trade together because the ETF needs to buy them all when there's this news. So, overbought. I would look for support around this 7 level. It was support here, support here. You can see when we blasted through it, we gapped up. I guess there's probably a lot of buy stop orders in here. Notice how I'm using all these, effects. I'm trying to make this thing like a kind of just like a parody, and it has to do with like pretend you're stoned and you're looking at it, so it's kind of like psychedelic. But anyway, again, we see this Kronos group, right? Oh, actually, this is a mistake. This should be CRON. Oh. Anyway, overbought. It was $8 resistance here. It was resistance here. I look for this to come back in over the next few days, and then it's a pretty wide range, but it's pretty well defined. 550 on the downside, $8 on the upside. All right, let's see what this next effect is. All right, this is that Emerald Health that we made that profitable trade last week. Actually, it was a couple weeks ago. And, you can see this thing gapped up, overbought. Resistance, probably going to be resistance at 3. So I'd be watching for that. Probably come back in a little bit. All right, so GW Pharmaceuticals. We spoke about this last week. It broke its downtrend, consolidating. And now it's going to be testing some resistance there, 140. It was resistance back here and resistance back here. We talked about a potential trade here if it found support and broke its downtrend line, but we never entered the trade because the downtrend line was never broken. So that's what I talk about when I say, you can't try to catch a falling knife or be a bottom fisher. You have to have a reason for entering a trade. And I would have gotten into that trade had this trend line been broken, but it was never broken, so I never got into the trade, so I never lost money. So this is the ETF I was telling you about. And, an ETF is based off this index, which is a basket of all these other stocks. So the ETF needs to stay in line with all the other stocks. So if one stock goes up, the ETF is going to buy it or whatever, or increase its weighting and so forth. So that's why you see a lot of these things trade similar patterns, even though they're in different industries. So this thing gapped up, overbought. I'd look for support around 13. Innovative Industrial Properties, pay attention to this 34.75 level. Okay, it was resistance back here. resistance here, support here. And I mean, this is a perfect chart to show you that certain levels are more important than others. Like, you know, a lot more went on at this 34.75 level, right, than went on at, I don't know, any level, say this level, 31, right? So obviously this, you don't need to be a market guru or a chart guru to know that this level, 34.75, is an important level. Just like this level here, 32.50 is an important level. See, support there, and there was a support there again. So there could be some big hedge fund or institutional buyer that's just making a stand at 32.50, buying it, you know, not really worrying if they get a better price, they just want to own it. I guess you could say the same thing over the last few days about this level. But you can see this is a perfect illustration of how certain levels are more important than others with regards to the amount of supply and demand on them. And obviously for this stock, for the last since our year to date, 34.75 and 32.50 have been important levels. So going forward, you know, if this level ends up breaking, I would look for support for here again. If this level ends up breaking, I think we're probably going to see, you know, a meaningful sell-off. If this thing rallies, I'd be looking for resistance around here because this was the prior top. So that's 39. So I would say if this rallies, 39. So look for resistance at 39 and look for support at 34.75. All right, so this thing, you know, was important out here, 650, jumped up on the whole news we were talking about, but it's just been consolidating. I don't really know much to say about this one, but I guess if it sells off, I'd look for support around the 650 level. This Kush Bottles, we've been watching this 450 level for a long time. Now it's a resistance level, so just keep an eye on that. Scott's Miracle-Gro had earnings this day, and this was like a crazy day. And this shows you one of the problems with the markets these days, at least in my opinion, because there are so many trading platforms, it increases this volatility, right? Because I think there's 13 public exchanges and like 50 dark pools and alternating trading state, you know, things. So some of them share their trades, some of them don't. In other words, say you go into Goldman Sachs's dark pool and you want to sell a stock at 20, and they have a 20 bid in their pool, you could sell it at 20. Well, Morgan Stanley might have had a 20.05 bid in their pool, but Goldman's not going to send it over there because they don't want Morgan Stanley to get the business. So you could have gotten a better price if this market was all centralized. And when things used to trade on the New York Stock Exchange, for all intents and purposes, stuff was centralized and there was the most liquidity there and so forth. So that's why we have these markets that make these massive changes for seemingly no reason. It's because they're very disjointed, and some of these dark pools and exchanges are linked into each other, some of them aren't, but it's very disjointed. And if you take a look at some of these microcap stocks that trade on, like, say, 10 different platforms or 10 different exchanges, I mean, the opening price on each platform could be completely different for each exchange. Like, it might open at 19.50 on one system and then open at 20.5 on another system. All right. Ultimately, the value is determined by whatever the primary exchange is, but it's just, you know, just a sign that because of what's going on with these markets, they're completely fragmented, and that's why you have these big moves. I mean, if you look at the S&P 500 in the week after Pearl Harbor was bombed, the move down on the week was 3%. All right, this is like the start of World War II, because then we declared war on Japan, and then the Nazis or the Germans declared war on us because they had a treaty with Japan, and so World War II is starting, and the market's down 3%. All right, over the course of a week. That could happen now with one stupid story. Donald Trump is going to get impeached. The market could be down 3% in 15 minutes. Donald Trump is not going to get impeached. Well, now the market could be right back up to where it was. So, in my opinion, one of the reasons why we have such volatile markets now is because of the complete fragmentation of and the amount of venues that things get traded on. All right, so this is the stock that Constellation Brands made its investment in. And like I said, the fact that Goldman Sachs and Bank of America were involved in it I've even heard it called transformational. I mean, it's a big deal. It's like if Goldman Sachs is getting into it, they're smart people, obviously. So, and like I said, they're probably going to lobby to get it all legal here in the U.S. and make more money. That's why they call it Goldman Sachs. I don't know. I guess I'd look at this 42 level if it was going down a little bit, but it doesn't seem very well defined. So just going to have to see how this one plays out. But if it does sell off a lot, I mean, this level is pretty clear, this 33.50 level. Okay, see, it was resistance here, support here. But we'll see what happens. I mean, if this news is really that good, the stock might never trade at those levels again. All right, so these are just some of the things I talk to my institutional clients about. If you want to get into one of these positions, you got to consider the liquidity and the volume. You got to consider, are there real brokers trading it? Are there real companies? A lot of this stuff trades in Canada, so you got to consider the ADR or the primary. If you're a hedge fund managing partner or whatever, and you think you can and you want to trade these stocks and you think you can outsource the trading or have a junior trader, guess what? You're not going to be effective. So, this stuff doesn't trade on algorithms well. You need relationships. And frankly, if you're a micro cap or small cap manager, you should be looking at your trader as a profit center and not a cost. Because if you have a competent trader, you're going to be able to manage a lot more money than if you didn't. You go outsourcing your micro cap fund, you go outsourcing junior trader, or some sell side idiot who thinks he's a big shot but doesn't know what he's doing. You're going to get to $200-300 million and you're going to have liquidity issues. You get a guy who knows what they're doing, like myself, for instance, you get up to $1 billion, $2 billion. Because if it's out there, we're going to find it. It's a hide and seek game. If you're looking to sell something and there's a bid, we'll find it. Sometimes we can even create it, right? Like in the microcap markets, the market creates the order sometimes, because if a big block of a stock shows up, it's like, all right, well, top 5 holder getting out. There's 1 million shares. There's only 50,000 on the tape. That's going to create the order, because if the PM wants to buy that stock, he better have had his research done, because that trade might only happen once every 2 years. So, there's going to be these funds that want to get into this. I think there's going to be a big presence in the micro cap and small cap world. And as we just saw, now that these things are getting trading histories, interesting levels or defined levels are starting to develop. All right, so here's our fun facts, just to kind of end on a light note. The first item ever sold over the internet was a bag of marijuana, and I never knew this until last week. It was the students at Stanford buying weed from their counterparts at MIT. So a bunch of brainiacs were doing this stuff, 40 years ago. Now, I kind of mentioned this before, all right? From 1850 to 1942, 92 years, marijuana was a medicine. You could go into the local pharmacy or general store and get it. It wasn't publicly shunned, or so it didn't have a social stigma, and that's kind of where we're getting back to now. There are approximately 200 slang terms for marijuana. I got this out of the Urban Dictionary. I thought this was pretty cool. In World War II, the government spiked cigarettes with marijuana and gave them to prisoners. They try to use it as like a truth serum. So that's pretty funny. You don't hear people talk about that. And since 2015, marijuana is the fastest growing industry in the U.S. And if it becomes legal in all states, it's going to be bigger than the organic food market. So that's what I'm telling you. That's what my message is that this stuff is going to become legal federally. I mean, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be in a month, but I mean, I would say within the next year, because like I said, you have these powerful bodies now that are probably going to be lobbying for it. And obviously, you know, Washington is run by money, and we get these big investment banks that go down there and say, all right, well, you know, we'll donate to your campaign and we'll donate to your campaign. You know, it's like that whole, the thing with the EpiPens, right? When whatever company made them, you know, raised the price like $2,000. And then it turns out the CEO of the company is some, you know, woman, and it seems like the only credential she has is that her father was a senator, Senator Munchin or whatever his name is, from I think West Virginia. So, you know, here's a completely incompetent woman who, you know, now has probably tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and she got the job because, you know, her father was a senator, is a senator, and they probably said, well, if we bring her in and hire her, then her father's going to pass laws for us. So whatever, you know, that's a little vent, but point is that we all know that Washington is run by money. So I'd be surprised if in a year from now or 2 years from now at the latest, marijuana is not federally legal in all capacities. All right, so anyway, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. I thought the rest of the Puff the Magic Dragon song was going to play here, but I guess I did something wrong. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. I got a great background. So, you know, what's funny is most people, then they look at this, they ask me about two things. Oh, you're a golfer and you're a classically trained guitar player. And yes, I am a classically trained guitar player, and I do still try to play. I actually did some professional recording like 4 or 5 years ago, and I have it in CD form, but you know, it's funny, people listen to it and all they say is like, oh, you're so good, you're so good. When I hear it, all I hear is, man, I made a mistake here, I made a mistake here. But that's the thing about, you know, music or golf, is that you're never going to master it. You know, it's a continual process. And I guess it's the same thing with trading. You know, you got to continually sharpen your skills, continually study, continually try to master yourself. And if you do that, you're going to, I guess, be successful. All right, so we're going to be successful. All right, so that's this week's Wheelie Report. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you all next week.
Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. A dragon lives forever, but not so little boys. Painted wings and giant's rings make way for other toys. One gray night it happened, Jackie Paper came no more, and Puff, that mighty dragon, he ceased his fearless roar. His head was bent in sorrow, green scales fell like rain.